this week, I sort of arranged the news by country. We'll start with the news in Russia. Following a string of apprehensions targeting officials within the Russian Defense Ministry over alleged corruption, British intelligence analysts anticipate a continuation of the trend. As per a report from the British Defense Ministry, recent events suggest a recurring pattern. On May 23rd, news emerged of the detention of Lieutenant General Vadim Shamarin, Russia's deputy chief of the General Staff, on suspicion of accepting a significant bribe. He faces charges under Article 290, Part 6 of the Criminal Code. This incident marks the latest in a series of arrests involving other senior figures from the Russian Ministry of Defense implicated in corruption, including Deputy Minister of Defense Timur Ivanov and the head of Human Resources, Yuri Kuznetsov. All of these arrests have occurred subsequent to Sergei Shoigu's removal from the position of Minister of Defense on May 12th. Shamarin previously served as the head of the Communications Department within the Russian Ministry of Defense starting from 2021. Notably, one of his predecessors in that role, Colonel General Khalil Arslanov, faced corruption charges back in 2020. British intelligence believes that corruption runs deep within the Russian MOD and anticipates further arrests. As previously reported by Ukrinform, this week witnessed the arrest of Major General Ivan Popov, the former commander of the 58th Combined Arms Army, on corruption allegations. Popov had been relieved of his duties last July after criticizing the state of the Russian army and its high casualty rates. On May 23rd, Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a decree permitting the confiscation of assets belonging to U.S. citizens and entities as a means to offset the loss of Russian assets seized by the United States. The Repo Act, approved by U.S. Congress, grants President Biden's administration the authority to seize Russian assets held in American banks and redirect them to Ukraine. Western nations and Ukraine's allies have frozen approximately $300 billion of Russian assets in response to the full-scale invasion, with approximately $5 to $8 billion of these assets situated in the United States. The decree empowers Russian citizens, companies, and the central bank to contest asset seizures in court if they deem them unjustified. Subsequently, the Russian government could offer U.S.-held assets in Russia as compensation. Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council and Drunk Wine Mom on Twitter, had previously warned of retaliatory measures should the U.S. proceed with the seizure of Russian assets. In March, the European Commission proposed allocating 90% of the seized funds to purchase weapons for Ukraine, with the remaining 10% earmarked for the EU budget to support the country's defense industry. After weeks of deliberation, EU ambassadors reached a political consensus on the proposal on May 8th. The EU Council finalized the agreement on May 21st, paving the way for annual financial support ranging from between 2.5 and 3 billion euros for Ukraine, with a significant portion allocated to Kyiv's military. Later that day, the European Commission announced that the funds would be accessible to support Ukraine starting from July of 2024 with biannual disbursements. Up next for the Netherlands. Dutch Defense Minister Minias stated that the Netherlands and other allies will allocate $175 million for additional military equipment for Ukraine. According to Ollongren, Ukraine requires extra resources to enhance its defense capabilities against air and sea attacks, and the International Fund for Ukraine is procuring equipment worth $175 million with co-financing from the Netherlands. The IFU functions as an additional financial support mechanism for Ukraine, spearheaded by the UK Ministry of Defense. It's a governing body that includes Norway, the Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, and Lithuania. These nations, alongside Iceland, Australia, New Zealand, have collectively contributed over €1 billion so far to the fund. And we'll talk in a little bit about Norway's contribution also to the fund. Up next in Poland, Interior Minister Tomasz Siemoniak announced measures to enhance security around the Rzeszów-Jasionka airport, a crucial hub for transporting Western cargo to Ukraine's front line. He emphasized the unprecedented nature of the situation there, labeling a hostile kinetic action by a foreign state, specifically pointing to actions of sabotage orchestrated by Russia's defense intelligence agency, GRU. Siemoniak highlighted the recruitment of one-time agents by Russian intelligence, including individuals from football hooligans or organized crime groups, to carry out actions for singular financial gain. In other words, GRU is hiring people, for these one-time operations with financial incentives. He stressed the seriousness of the situation, noting a shift in Russian intelligence tactics towards more purposeful actions on foreign soil, such as direct acts of sabotage. The context of this story includes earlier statements by the Polish defense minister, Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, and Prime Minister Donald Tusk regarding the security threats posed by Russian intelligence operations with Poland. They addressed the Sejm, the Polish parliament, regarding security actions, while Tusk announced the arrest of individuals involved in acts of sabotage ordered by Russian secret services. Additionally, Tusk initiated an investigation into Russian and Belarusian influence in Poland from 2004 to 2024, which is part of a previous commission that was established under the Law and Justice government. Up next, in France. France has reaffirmed its current intentions to produce Bastion armored vehicles for Ukraine, as reported by the Forces Operations blog. Emmanuel Levacher, CEO of Arcus, confirmed that the company is presently in the process of manufacturing 11 Bastion series armored vehicles, with the potential for an order of 100 armored vehicles for Ukraine. The plans to supply 11 Bastion armored vehicles were initially announced in April 2023. However, the execution of this order had been put on hold. Company representatives cited the absence of a specific French-Ukrainian agreement as the reason that the armored vehicles were not transferred. Notably, the decision to allocate some of these armored vehicles to Armenia drew criticism from certain quarters of the French government. According to the latest updates from the Forces Operations blog, the armored vehicles previously earmarked for Armenia have now been redirected to Ukraine. It is anticipated that these vehicles will be delivered by July of 2024. Company representatives have expressed readiness to produce an additional 100 Bastion vehicles if Ukraine expresses interest. Earlier reports from Militarny indicated that France would allocate hundreds of armored vehicles to Ukraine as part of a new military assistance package sourced from the French army. While acknowledging that the VAB APC is aging equipment, the French minister highlighted its usability and potential benefits for Ukraine. This is their standard armored personnel carrier. The minister further stated that hundreds of these vehicles are slated to arrive in Ukraine during 2024 and early 2025. France intends to inaugurate a new facility in Belgium for manufacturing 155 artillery shells, as reported by the Military Observer for the Insider, who is Colby. So sadly, Colby's not with us today, but I was just doing my report as per usual, and Colby is the source for this story, so I was hoping we could talk to him about it a little bit, but oh well. Operated by KNDS Mekar, a subsidiary of the French company Ouest France, the plant is scheduled to commence operations next week in Petite Rue Le Neuville, Belgium. This strategic move is expected to significantly bolster the production capacity of artillery shells, meeting the pressing demands of both Ukrainian and European armed forces. The specialized facility will focus on producing the artillery shells, with subsequent explosive filling to be carried out at other plants in Belgium and France. While the plant's establishment marks a crucial step in full-scale production, it's slated to commence no earlier than 2025, notwithstanding efforts to enhance the production rates. In tandem with expanding artillery shell production, France is also ramping up the manufacturing of special modular artillery charges utilized in firing the shells. Modular propellant charge manufacturer Urenco plans to boost production to 500,000 units annually. Under the arrangement, the French company will inaugurate production facilities in Bergerac, I assume, with an investment exceeding 500 million euros. Earlier reports by Militarny discussed the construction of a new gunpowder line in Bergerac to cater to the needs of the EU and Ukraine. The new production line is scheduled to commence operations in early 2025, with initial deliveries slated for Ukrainian military shortly thereafter. You know, I practiced the Polish names. I should have practiced the French ones. Next time I see France come up, I'm going to do that. So next we have Norway. On May 23rd, Norway unveiled a new military assistance package for Ukraine valued at approximately 150 million pounds. I assume this is from the BBC, or 190 million US dollars. This aid initiative falls under the umbrella of the International Fund for Ukraine, the IFU, which, as I mentioned previously, draws contributions from various countries that I mentioned. Defense Minister Bjorn Alrid Gram reaffirmed Norway's solidarity with Ukraine, stating, "We stand with and support Ukraine for as long as necessary." Grom emphasized the pressing need for an increased weaponry and military resources in Ukraine, highlighting the international fund as crucial for supporting the efforts. Norway recently intensified its efforts to enhance defense production to meet both domestic requirements and to provide assistance to Ukraine. In January, Norway has allocated 2 billion Norwegian kroner, which again is about 190 million for Ukrainian aid. According to the Kiel Institute for the World Economy, which monitors international aid to Ukraine, their commitments so far have passed $2 billion as of February 2024, like their total commitments. The Norwegian government also is implementing stricter entry requirements for Russian citizens traveling to the country for tourism purposes, with the new regulations set to come into effect on the 29th of May. Emil Enger Mell, the Minister of Justice and Public Security from the Center Party, emphasized that the decision aligns with Norway's stance of solidarity with allies and partners responding to Russia's unlawful war of aggression against Ukraine. The tightening of entry rules builds upon previous measures, including the tightening of visa issuance rules for Russian citizens in spring of 2022. Under the new rules, entry to Norway will be significantly restricted, with police refusing entry to Russian citizens not included in an exception list. This restriction applies to individuals who received visas from Norway before spring of 2022, as well as those whose visas were issued by other Schengen Agreement countries. Minister Mell clarified that Russian citizens intending to visit Norway for tourism or other non-essential purposes will be denied entry. The government emphasized its vigilance at border crossings, particularly at the Storskog border checkpoint, affirming the readiness to take action as necessary. So just real quick, we actually do have a person of the Norwegian persuasion with us here. So Erlend, I wanted to ask you, this is the international coverage, of course, of the stories. But if there's anything you wanted to clarify from your reading of any local coverage, please enlighten us.
Well, I guess, first of all, the military package that was announced by the Norwegian MOD is totally valued 150 million pounds. But we don't know exactly how much of that money is coming from Norway. What we do know is, and let me just try and pull that up. What we do know is that it's some of the equipment that is being provided is some anti-drone equipment. So this is, I think there's the Dingo 2 vehicles that are probably coming from Germany and then being modified by Kongsberg with an anti-drone system made by Kongsberg. So that's at least some of it. Other material that is being transferred is air defense systems. I'm not sure, maybe some components to NASAMS and maritime surveillance equipment. And that's probably also part of the joint UK-Norway effort to bolster the Ukrainian maritime capacities.
Gotcha. And just for my own curiosity, is this visa restriction, is that something that's extensively covered? Was there a lot of buzz about it in the Norwegian press, or is it kind of unremarkable?
Well, what I would say is that it got coverage. It didn't get any. So the good thing is that it didn't get any criticism. It was more like, yeah, the Minister of Internal Affairs and Justice basically just did an announcement, and that's it. No one criticized it. So I think this is way overdue. The only criticism I saw was from other people on Twitter who said, like, we should have done this 2 years ago, and also we should be more strict, because the big problem here is that they're only restricting basically visa for tourists and entry for tourism, which isn't necessarily the big problem. The big problem about Russian intelligence being, present in Norway is not necessarily people on tourist visas. There's a big debate about getting rid of all the Russian fishing boats that are operating in our territorial waters and economic zone, because we have this fishing agreement with the Russians, where they're also allowed to go to port in Norway. When the full-scale invasion of Ukraine started, there were restrictions of those on those vessels, so they're only allowed to go to 4 ports. And the reason why they're doing that and letting them go to those 4 ports, according to the government, is that so they can have stricter monitoring and control over those vessels. But there is, of course, a problem about this, because we know that the Russians are using what they call research vessels for basically spying on enemy military installations and infrastructure. And I don't know if any one of you remember, but when the Nord Stream thing happened, there was a lot of activity with Russian so-called research vessels around the gas pipelines that are going to the UK and to mainland Europe. And we should get rid of all of them, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, if there are any updates in terms of any of that stuff, please, of course, don't hesitate to let us know. And from there, we will depart Europe's happiest petrostate to another neighboring country, a new NATO, also happy NATO member, Sweden. So the Swedish government has unveiled plans to extend further military assistance to Ukraine, amounting to 75 billion Swedish kroner, which amounts to 7.1 billion US dollars over the course of 3 years. This initiative is part of a broader framework program for military support to Ukraine covering the years 2024 to 2026, aimed at bolstering Swedish backing for the country. The additional funding will supplement Sweden's existing military and civilian aid to Ukraine, surpassing a total of 100 billion Swedish kroner, or 9.3, I assume, million. Is that million? No, I assume that's got to be billion. It's a typo here to say million. Sorry. The military aid package for Ukraine will encompass various components, including the provision of defense equipment through free transfers, financial contributions, and support for defense equipment procurement. The government acknowledges that this program may strain public finances for several years, extending beyond 2026. Cooperating parties declared that they are committed to providing assistance to Ukraine in a manner that does not compromise Sweden's own defense capabilities or impede essential reforms to their military. Sweden's defense minister Paul Jonsson highlighted that following Sweden's potential accession to NATO, it could take up to 2 years to reach the desired capacity to furnish Ukraine with additional ammunition while enhancing its own armed forces. Meanwhile, the supreme commander of the Swedish armed forces, Mikael Biden, or Biden? I'm going to go with Biden. This would be too coincidental otherwise. Warned on the 22nd of May that Vladimir Putin, the leader of the Kremlin, harbors intentions to assert control over the Swedish island of Gotland. And next we go to the good old USA. The U.S. Department of Defense has unveiled a significant security aid package for Ukraine aimed at addressing the critical security and defense requirements of the Ukrainian armed forces. According to a press release from the Pentagon on Friday, as reported by Ukrinform, this marks the 5th security assistance package authorized by the president since the signing of the National Security Supplemental last month, and the 3rd package employed using the Presidential Drawdown Authority. This Presidential Drawdown Authority package is part of the United States' ongoing efforts to support Ukraine in repelling Russia's offensive near Kharkiv. The assistance is designed to furnish Ukraine with additional capabilities to address its most pressing battlefield needs. These include the provision of additional precision strike rockets for HIMARS, artillery rounds, air-launched ammunition, anti-tank weapons, as well as other munitions, including 155, 105, 66 millimeter mortar rounds, tube-launched weapons, tow missiles, javelin anti-tank weapons, precision aerial munitions, also supplementary rounds of small arms, grenades, demolition munitions, anti-armor mines, tactical vehicles for equipment recovery, helmets, body armor, and chemical, biological, and radiation warfare equipment. Also spare parts maintenance, all kinds of stuff. Sounds like a very comprehensive package. According to Aaron Hannigan, a spokesperson for the U.S. Air National Guard, the initial group of Ukrainian pilots has successfully completed the F-16 training program in Arizona, as reported in a comment to Politico on May 23rd. Under agreements with the Netherlands, Belgium, Denmark, and Norway, Ukraine is set to acquire numerous American-built 4th-generation fighter jets. As part of the fighter jet coalition framework, several countries, including the U.S., have committed to providing necessary training for Ukrainian pilots. Due to safety concerns, Hannigan refrained from disclosing the precise number of graduates or the exact date of their graduation. The newly trained aviators are scheduled to undergo additional training in Europe, according to Politico's undisclosed sources. Training for the Ukrainian pilots commenced at Morris Air National Guard Base in Tucson, Arizona, last October, facilitated by the Air National Guard's 162nd Wing. Additional training for pilots is being conducted in Denmark, and Romania has also established an F-16 training facility for Ukrainian aviators. Earlier this week, the Dutch Defense Ministry announced that the first group of 10 Ukrainian military personnel had completed F-16 maintenance training in the Netherlands. Following a report by the New York Times detailing Russia's increasing disruption of Ukraine's Starlink service, Elon Musk announced on May 24th that SpaceX is dedicating significant resources to counteracting Russian jamming efforts. SpaceX, under Elon Musk's leadership, commenced providing Starlink terminals to Ukraine shortly after Russia's full-scale invasion on February 2022. Last year, Ukraine reported approximately 42,000 operational terminals across military installations, hospitals, businesses, and aid organizations in Ukraine. Starlink is renowned for its superior security compared to traditional communication methods like cellular and radio signals, and it plays a vital role in Ukrainian operations. The Pentagon entered into an agreement with SpaceX last year to financially support access for the Ukrainian military. According to the New York Times, Russian interference has led to widespread outages of Ukraine's Starlink service during its offensive near Kharkiv, impeding soldiers' communication, intelligence gathering, and drone operations. John Plum, Assistant Secretary for Defense for Space Policy at the U.S. Department of Defense, revealed in a Bloomberg interview on May 9th that the Pentagon is taking steps to prevent the Russian military from using Starlink internet terminals on the battlefield in Ukraine, although he did not specify the methods employed. As far as I understand, he also mentioned, there was a mention that they're looking into how it's being jammed and how to counteract that. That was Elon Musk that announced that. I already mentioned that. So, yep. Moving on to the Ukraine news, which is the last section for today. As of May 24th, 2024, Ukrainian farmers have successfully seeded over 12 million hectares with spring crops, with sowing operations already concluded in 5 regions, as reported by the Ukrainian Agrarian Policy and Food Ministry. Within the territory under Ukrainian control, approximately 6.7 million hectares have been sown with oil seeds, while grain and leguminous crops cover 5.4 million hectares. Notably, more than 96% of the planned areas for grain and leguminous crops have already been sown. I'm not going to give you the actual hectare acreage, breakdown of all the crops, but I thought you guys might be interested to know, like, what are the crops that are the main ones. So in order of cultivated hectares by topic, the breakdown includes corn, barley, wheat, oats, peas, buckwheat, and millet. In terms of oil seeds, sunflowers, soybeans, and also sugar beets. In the past week, cultivation area has expanded by 311,000 hectares. The Poltava region has led the country in terms of their sowing. Chernihiv has also made a lot of progress, and the campaign has been completed in Volyn, Poltava, Vinnytsia, Odessa, Ternopil, Helmensky, and Chernivtsi. And in 2023, the country harvested 80 million tons of grain and oilseed crops, with exports valued at approximately $22 billion. Since the start of the year, the Ukrainian government has earmarked upwards of $500 million hryvnia, which is the equivalent to approximately $12.5 billion for the nation's defense. This was announced by Ukraine's Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal. Throughout this period, according to him, every hryvnia contributed by taxpayers to the budget has been promptly directed to the government towards arms, drones, equipment, and the welfare of the military personnel, including salaries. He mentioned that during the full-scale invasion, it's been a key accomplishment of the government to ensure financial stability of the state. During this period, over $85 billion in external funding for the government has been secured. However, Shmyhal emphasized that funds for government's support that have been procured from partner countries can only be allocated for non-military purposes. In other words, when, non-military money is given to support the Ukrainian government, they don't give it to the military, so they have to find other ways to fund the military. The government is funding defense efforts through taxpayer contributions and military bonds, noted Shmyhal. And they mentioned this week that military bonds and other means of fundraising have raised over $1 trillion hryvnia for the budget. And since that's half a billion hryvnia is 12.5 billion, I can do some simple math to say that's 25 billion US dollars that they've raised through those methods. According to Brigadier General Yevgeny Ostryansky, head of the main Department of Defense Planning of Ukraine's General Staff, the General Staff is undergoing a significant reform that will result in a 60% reduction in staff numbers, with some personnel being reassigned to combat units. During the briefing, he stated that a functional review is being conducted at the General Staff in February-March of this year, and that led to a decision to streamline the staffing of various units and military command bodies. This involves disbanding certain military structures, establishing new ones, and optimizing existing ones to eliminate redundant functions and reduce personnel by 60%. He further explained that the personnel being dismissed will be reallocated to reinforce operational and tactical command bodies as well as combat units. This reallocation will facilitate the rotation of units engaged in prolonged combat missions in conflict zones. He also emphasized that Ukraine's defense ministry recognizes the necessity of strengthening command structures responsible for directing troop groups during times of war. Additionally, measures are being taken to enhance the organizational structures of the armed forces, including the establishment of the Command for Unmanned Systems Forces. This is like a new department that they're creating. With financial backing from the North Atlantic Alliance, NATO, Ukraine is set to equip 5 rehabilitation hospitals, as announced by Natalia Kalmykova, Deputy Minister of Defense, during a roundtable discussion titled The Successes and Challenges of Rehabilitation of Military in Ukraine. Kalmykova outlined plans to finance and outfit 5 rehabilitation hospitals under the recovery program of the Ministry of Defense, with repair works already in progress at 1 hospital in the Kyiv region. Additionally, 2 hospitals in Kyiv and Vinnytsia are undergoing repairs with assistance from donor funds. Efforts are underway to develop a unified information system bridging the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Health. This system aims to integrate information on military personnel from civilian life to ensure seamless transition and continuity of care between military and civilian healthcare providers. In relation to developments, a modern gym featuring rehabilitation equipment has been inaugurated within the Kyiv Military Hub, offering free exercise facility for military personnel and veterans. Equipped with state-of-the-art rehabilitation simulators, the gym caters to individuals with amputations or mobility impairments, providing both independent workouts and sessions with rehabilitation therapists. Moreover, plans for a modern rehabilitation center addressing both physical and psychological needs of military personnel and civilians are underway through collaboration between the Foundation of American Philanthropists, Deloy Hansen, and the Kyiv Regional Military Administration. This ambitious project, requiring substantial investment, seeks involvement from philanthropists, governmental agencies, and non-governmental organizations for successful implementation. On May 22nd, Ukraine's parliament, the Verkhovna Rada, approved the establishment of a special temporary commission on fortifications, according to a lawmaker in the Ukrainian parliament. Criticism of the government's slow progress in fortifying front lines has intensified amid growing concerns about the potential of new Russian offensives, particularly following Russian forces' incursions into the northern part of Kharkiv in May. The proposal to form a special commission received support from the lawmakers, over 277 lawmakers, with them emphasizing the importance of it. The president announced in March that Ukraine was constructing 2,000 kilometers of fortifications across 3 defense lines, expressing satisfaction with the progress despite the monumental task at hand. Prime Minister Shmyhal revealed in April that nearly $950 million had been allocated by the government for fortifications this year. Following the swift advance of Russian forces in Kharkiv on May 10th, local authorities faced criticism for insufficient defenses in what was considered one of the most heavily fortified regions. The head of the military administration of a border town, which was a focal point of the recent offensive, cited challenges in construction due to the proximity of the Russian border and ongoing shelling. And my last story of this week, a major tragedy. Russian airstrikes hit a bustling do-it-yourself hardware store and residential area in Kharkiv, Ukraine, resulting in the deaths of at least 6 individuals and injuring 40 others, according to local officials. There's also mentions of it being called a hypermarket or a mall or a supermarket. Regional Governor Ola Sinyehubov reported on national television that 4 people lost their lives when 2 guided bombs struck the DIY hypermarket situated in a residential part of the city. Additionally, 40 individuals sustained injuries in the attack, with 16 still missing. Among the deceased are at least 2 store employees. Kharkiv Mayor Ihor Terechov characterized the assault as an act of terrorism, noting that approximately 120 people were inside the hardware store at the time of bombings. Later in the evening, another missile strike struck at a residential building at the city center, which caused injuries to 18 people. The impact of the missile left a substantial crater in the pavement at the building's base, which also housed a post office, beauty salon, and a cafe. So that does it for my news this week. As always, screw Russia.